Question 4. The love of all money is the root of all evil, folk. Was the pre-written history time before money's invention a paradise? So I saw somebody come up with this quote, and many of you might have heard it before, and I have issues with it. There's some things people just say to say, and I'm trying to reduce the things I say just to say. And to that end, I'm going to read you the actual quote, the actual location from the quote, and this is a quote that is normally taken from the Bible. I'm going to read you from 1 Timothy 6, chapter 10. That's where it normally comes from. I'm going to read you the King James Version of the entire Timothy, 1 Timothy chapter 6, so I can give you the context and things that have this actual quote. And people are, you're taking it out of context. Because people normally take it out of context. People normally say money is the root of all evil, as is just money itself, rather than the love of money. And then I'm going to read you also 2 articles, one from the History Channel, the History Channel, history.org. It is 8 things you may not know about money. And I'm going to read you this thing from Investopedia, which is the history of money. I think it's just interesting to just understand there is a difference between money and currency. How long has money been a thing? Because with this thing, even if you say it's the love of money, like pursuit of money, people things do for money, is supposedly the root of all evil. I'm like, really? Because there was a time before money, and that time was not a time I would want to be alive in. Money has a lot of positive purposes. Then there's good people and there's bad people that have certain things that they want to do with that money, and it's not money itself that actually initiated them being good or bad. It's the things that they want that money can let them have or prevent from happening to them. And these are most of those things I think are positive for society and culture. That's why money was developed. And hey, maybe there'll be a future with something that doesn't really have this money. Might be out in space or with replicators where there's different kind of abundance of credits or different things that are in there. But yeah, so to understand where we can go, I think we got to understand where we came from and come to this. So let's just go with the 1 Timothy chapter 6. I'm just going to read it from the start. Like I said, it's going to be in verse 10 is where this is going to come in, and there's 21 verses. So it's right smack dab in the middle of this thing, and it's going to be the King James Version. And just this whole thing, the root, the general premise from the Bible, I've talked about this in separate videos. I think if there was a hell, the only being that would deserve to be in that hell is the being that created that hell, which would be the Christian God. Specifically, if you do believe in a God that created a place where somebody can be punished eternally in any kind of state, even if it's just sitting in a room and no actual harm is coming to you, just in an eternal state of punishment for doing temporal crimes, sometimes temporal thought crimes. And like, no, you are an evil being and you're the only person who needs that eternal timeout, and you should be over there. So with this whole root of all evil, even if you believe in a mostly benign Christian God or other forms of gods, maximally powerful gods, normally those gods were also responsible for creating everything, including the evil. In the Christian kind of thing, it's not even the root of all evil is the tree that had the roots where Eve went and got the fruit and got the knowledge and then they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. No, who made that tree? Who made those humans? Who made the rules of that thing? Who made the angels? Who made Lucifer, who had the whole fight against him, and who threw him down onto earth to do all those things? It was God. So even in general, the root of all evil is the creator of evil, which was the Christian God. But let's actually just read it here from 1 Timothy chapter 6. And I might give some things, like verse 1. I don't know if I'm going to give some commentary through it. There's some things in here, like I'm already seeing in verse 1, they're talking about God and his doctrine be not blasphemed. This is like some of the things. There's a more recent, a younger Abrahamic religion that is more active at combating the blasphemy laws. But blasphemy laws is something that's in pretty much all religions. It's a common thing, and the Christians themselves, even in living memory in the Western world, we're talking about blasphemy and things. It's reduced. I remember there was a time when don't use the Lord's name in vain. That was something that I personally was raised with. A lot of people just curse and say those things. Oh God, Jesus says. It's a common thing to say, and I think the world is better for that. But let's not pretend that there wasn't a time when you'd be shunned, or places right now where you could lose jobs, you could lose friends, you could lose things off of that. There might be fewer places where you could lose life for saying that about the Christian God as you can for some of the religions like the Muslim God in certain places. But it's still an issue. It's part of the book. It's not because it's not part of your religion that you don't do it. It's because you are better than the actual base information in your religion that you don't do it. That's how I'm looking at it with the Christians. Probably the Jews. I haven't read the Torah, but I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if it's in there. Okay, I'm going to just try to read as much without actually coming back in and giving the commentary. Maybe after I'll talk about some stuff. Okay, so 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 1. Let as many servants as are under the yoke count their own masters worthy of all honor, that the name of God and his doctrine be not blasphemed. And okay, with the way this is written, I'm reading the King James Version because that's the one that I was raised with, but the grammar and the way it's actually used, and this could be one of the issues that we have right now with the different misunderstandings that we have between different political groups. They're saying certain words, but those words don't mean what I think they would think those words mean. They think it's something, but it's not quite that. And that's something that happens here too. Actually, they sneak this thing in here. Remember that let as many servants as are under the yoke count their own masters worthy of all honor. This is something about being enslaved. Like if you're enslaved, something like that was what was used to be like, yeah, look, he says it's under God. It's actually to honor God. If you will blaspheme God and God's doctrine, if you as a servant who are under my yoke as a master don't consider me worthy of honor, it's garbage. This is terrible stuff. This is terrible stuff. And this is 10 verses before the whole, the root of all evil is the love of money. Now, I think slavery, keeping servants under a yoke, is much more evil than the love of money or whatever. Okay, so let's get to the reading. There might be some stammers as I try to get in this actual dictionary. So let me start again. Let as many servants as are under the yoke count their own masters worthy of all honor, that the name of God and his doctrine be not blasphemed. And they that have believing masters, let them not despise them, because they are brethren, but rather do them service, because they are faithful and beloved partakers of the benefit. These things teach and exhort. If a man teach otherwise, and consent not to wholesome words, even the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, and to the doctrine which is according to godliness, he is proud, knowing nothing, but doting about questions and strifes of words, whereof cometh envy, strife, railings, evil surmisings. Perverse disputings of men of corrupt minds, and destitute of the truth, supposing that gain is godliness. From such withdraw thyself. But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we carry nothing out. And having food and raiment, let us therewith content. But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. But thou, O man of God, flee these things, and follow after righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, meekness. Fight the good fight of faith. Lay hold on eternal life, whereunto thou art also called, and hast professed a good profession before many witnesses. I give thee charge in sight of God, who quickeneth all things, and before Christ Jesus, who before Pontius Pilate witnessed a good confession, that thou keep this commandment without spot and rebukable, until the appearing of our Lord Jesus Christ, which in his times he shall shew, who is the blessed and only potentate, the King of kings, the Lord of lords, who only hath immortality, dwelling in the light which no man can approach unto, whom no man hath seen, nor can see, to whom be honor and power everlasting. Amen. Charge them that are rich in this world, that they be not high-minded, nor trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God, who giveth us richly all things to enjoy. That they do good, that they be rich in good works, ready to distribute, willing to communicate. laying up in store for themselves a good foundation against the time to come, that they may lay hold on eternal life. O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings, and oppositions of science falsely so called, which some professing have erred concerning the faith. Grace be with thee. Amen. So that's it for the end of the reading. And you can see with some of the language, just the grammar that was different from just a few hundred years ago to now can make some things kind of different. Like potentate, do you even know what that means? It's a monarch or ruler, especially an autocratic one, and that is something that's in there. I mean, I'm not surprised that God, who is the ultimate autocrat, the ultimate dictator, would be speaking well of the autocrats and things like that. But there's some parts in here where they're saying, okay, somebody should be ready to distribute. They're saying, okay, the rich fall into these things. And some people look at this like, oh, look at the Christians. Why are the Christians all like about money and the Republicans and things like this and all these Christians and whatnot with money? But yeah, look, he says you should be socialist. You should give the stuff. But it also says laying up in store for themselves a good foundation against the times to come. I think that could be used to say like, oh, this is more for saving. But then again, the Bible has these things that come in and out. It doesn't make sense because the people who wrote it were not as sensible as we are today. And it's like a book that was pieced together, 66 books, other books were left out, things were taken out of context at different times, and people were trying to do their best with the knowledge they have. And we just know better than what most of these people did. And most people would not write a story this disjointed and this hypocritical and this going back and forth with each other anymore to kind of put it out there. How good is the actual base dogma of the Scientologists? Because that's stuff that was rather recent, right? Like L. Ron Hubbard was an actually successful writer. So is his stuff more, like at least there's less plot holes? So people going back and forth, they use the whole like story tactics better. I don't know. So with the potentate, the king of the king, so you have to give to the Jesus. And then again, he's talking about here the root of all evil. Money is the root of evil. Love of money is the root of all evil. But just before they were like, yeah, you slaves, you servants, if your master is also Christian, then you kind of going against him is actually kind of going against Jesus in some sort of way. So no, that to me is way more evil than any of the things. There's also something here he talks about the commandment, and this is something I think some people don't really understand. Some Christians who I don't think really get this. There's actually about 613, if I'm correct with that number, actual commandments that are explicitly said these are commandments from God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, the triune being, or whatever you want to imagine. There's more than the 10 commandments. The 10 commandments are what a lot of people think of, but there's many other commandments within the actual book. So that's it for that part. That's the context. What do you think of this context? Look at all those other things that are around this. No, I don't think anything has been established to say the love of money is that, because even I don't think these people lived in a world already at this time when money was something that was used. It was a common thing. It was after the barter trade. So people probably still bartering. Like just like even today, you can still do barter trades. But there was a time. There was a time when there was actually no money. And with that, we're going to go to the history of money from barter to banknotes, and this is going to be from Investopedia. This is my transition. You like my transition? I don't know. I don't care if you like it. Okay, I do care a bit. You're going to listen to this. Let me know in the comment section. So let's get to this next reading. With coming back to this more modern English, I think the reading might go a little better than the previous one. Okay, the history of money from barter to banknotes. This is in the economy and economics section of Investopedia, and this is by Andrew Beatty. This was updated on June 17th of 2020. It's July 17th. So yeah, some recent info. Maybe there may be some nice spicy stuff in here, but maybe it's just some links. Okay, so money in and of itself has no actual value. It can be a shell, a metal coin, or a piece of paper. Its value is symbolic. It conveys the importance that people place on it. Money derives its value by virtue of its functions as a medium of exchange, a unit of measurement, a storehouse for wealth. Money allows people to trade goods and services indirectly. It helps communicate the price of goods. Prices written in dollars and cents correspond to a numerical amount in your possession, i.e., in your pocket, purse, or wallet. And it provides individuals with a way to store their wealth in the long term. The key takeaways from this article. I'm still going to actually read the article, but money in and of itself has no actual value. Its value is symbolic because it conveys the importance that people place on it. Money allows people to trade goods and services indirectly, communicate the price of goods, and it provides individuals with a way to store their wealth over a long term. Before money, people acquired and exchanged goods through a system of bartering, which involves the direct trade of goods and services. The first region in the world to use an industrial facility to manufacture coins that would be used as currency was in Europe in a region called Lydia, modern Western Turkey, in approximately 600 BC. So it's before Christ or before Common Era, depending on how you want to go with it. I think they still use BC in some places, but I've seen BCE also. The Chinese were the first to devise a system of paper money in approximately 770 BC. So they had the paper money, but they didn't have the coins. They didn't have the things. So I guess it was easier to print at that time. So yeah. Okay, back into the reading. Money is valuable merely because everyone knows that it will be accepted as a form of payment. However, throughout history, both the usage and the form of money have evolved. While most of the time the terms money and currency are used interchangeably, there are several theories that suggest that these terms are not identical. According to some theories, money is inherently an intangible concept, while currency is the physical, tangible manifestation of the intangible concept of money. By extension, according to this theory, money cannot be touched or smelled. Currency is the coin, note, object, etc. This is presented in the form of money. The basic form of money is numbers. Today, the basic form of currency is paper notes, coins, or plastic cards, for example, credit or debit cards. While this distinction between money and currency is important in some contexts, for the purposes of this article, the terms are used interchangeably. I'm glad they made that distinction here, and I suggest you watch this series by Mike Maloney. It's the history of money. It's a multi-part series that's excellent. It really opened my eyes up to certain things. It was over 5 years ago when I first actually watched this video. Mike Maloney, Money versus Currency, Hidden Secrets of Money, Episode 1. At least check that one out, and he has many more parts in it. He presents it in a very cogent and understandable and communicable way that I think it's this theory that's presented here in Investopedia. I don't see a problem with it, because in the United States of America, when you need to pay for something with money, use the dollar as currency. If you come to Kenya and you need to pay for that same good with money, you use the Kenya shilling as currency. So the use of money is a different thing. Somebody requires money, but the way you exchange that money is through currency. So with that one, I completely understand. Like $1 is equivalent to 98 Kenya shillings. It's still representing the same kind of money, but the currency itself, you need 98 of those shillings to get the same thing you would be able to get with the single currency of the dollar. So there clearly is, I think, a difference, and it's worthwhile to understand that. And when I speak of the two things, I don't use them interchangeably, but at least they mentioned that is something that is going to be happening in this article. So for those who might notice that's something. Okay, so back to the reading. The transition from bartering to currency. Money in some way, shape, or form has been part of human history for at least 3,000 years. Before that time, historians generally agreed that a system of bartering was likely used. Bartering is a direct trade of goods and services. For example, a farmer may exchange a bushel of wheat for a pair of shoes from a shoemaker. However, these arrangements take time. If you're exchanging an axe as part of an agreement in which the other party is supposed to kill a woolly mammoth, you will have to find someone who thinks an axe is fair trade for having to face down the 12-foot tusks of a mammoth. If this doesn't work, you will have to alter the deal until someone agreed to the terms. Whenever I see alter the deal, I just remember that robot chicken kind of thing with Darth Vader. I am altering the deal. You must actually follow, or I'll alter the deal any further. Pray I don't alter the deal any further. It's a funny skit. Okay, so slowly a type of currency involving easily traded items like animal skins, salts, and weapons developed over the centuries. These traded goods served as a medium of exchange, even though the value of each of these items was still negotiable in many cases. This system of trading spread across the world, and it still survives today in some parts of the globe. One of the greatest achievements of the introduction of money was increasing the speed at which business whether mammoth slaying or monument building could be done. And to me, that is a good thing. Businesses have improved your life more than they've harmed them in majority of cases. You will find people who have had worse environments, but in general, it's been something that has been pro-human flourishing, and I support them. Whether it's small businesses, whether it's one person working by themselves, or the bigger ones where it's more people coming together, they're positives from these things. Things can be done better, but I am not thinking business, which is enabled by money, is the root of all evil. No. Okay. Chinese create objects that resemble modern-day coin. Sometime around 770 BC, the Chinese moved from using actual usable objects such as tools and weapons as a medium of exchange to using miniature replicas of these same objects that had been cast in bronze. Due to impracticality, nobody wants to reach into their pocket and impale their hands on a sharp arrow. These tiny daggers, spades, and hoes were eventually abandoned for objects in the shape of a circle. These objects became some of the first coins. Although China was the first country to use an object that modern people might recognize as coins, the first region of the world to use an industrial facility to manufacture coins that could be used as currency was in Europe, in a region called Lydia, now Western Turkey. Today, this type of facility is called a mint, and the process of creating currency in this way is referred to as minting. So I think this is a good thing to think of. Just think about the practicality. Someone's like, okay, we need to do this, so we're just going to make little tiny dagger spades and hoes because that's what we were exchanging anyway. And then they're like, okay, it's impractical to use. And think about many things that are going on. There's a lot of new things going on in society right now. There's a lot of things that were just introduced in living memory, that were introduced right before you were born, that people take for granted, like how long it actually used to take for things to develop and change, even though it's so practical. Like, it just seems so practical. Make it a coin. Make it a circle, make it a piece of paper. But paper wasn't that available. The ability to get mints and things like that wasn't that available. Right now, people just throw pennies, throw these things away when there are many things that we throw away today that took so many years to actually be developed as something useful. And that's the same thing, that there might be things we're using today that we think, like, we have to have this in our society. That future societies are like, why were you guys doing this completely pointless thing? Like, why didn't you just do this instead? So take heart in that. Realize that we're marching forward towards a better world for all humans. So let's keep working towards that. Okay, so next section. First official currency is minted. In 600 BC, Lydia's king, Alyattes, minted the first official currency. The coins were made from electrum, a mixture of silver and gold that occurs naturally, and the coins were stamped with pictures that acted as denominations. In the streets of Sardis in approximately 600 BC, a clay jar might cost you about 2 owls, or owls? What do you say, owls or owls? Owls or owls. And a snake. Okay, owls. I think it's Owl. Owl Jolson. I like the singer about the morning and the man and the June. I really like that. I really like that cartoon. It's really awesome. Okay, so Lydia's currency helped the country increase both its internal and external trading systems, making it one of the richest empires in Asia Minor. Today, when someone says as rich as Croesus, is it Croesus? They're referring to the last Lydian king who minted the first gold coin. And that's another thing, like the currency itself used to have a lot more value as currency in and of itself. Like, it used to go from the thing you were trading was the actual thing you were going to get the good out of. And then it went on where the currency itself had value in and of itself, being made from these shells and salt, which were still things you actually finding some use of. And then it went to like the currency, where it's actually the coins and things like this, where it's made out of rare metals that are valuable in and of themselves. You can melt down that coin and actually use it for actual things, practical things, and things that you'd find value of. And then now we're transitioning into here in the next section, transition to paper currency. And I'm pretty sure where his article is going, we're going to get into later in the parts where I'm like, okay, now we're transitioning where currency itself doesn't have any value, or we're just digital now. People just want like everything on the money. And it's already something that's done in some places. Like here in Kenya, it's like M-Pesa, people on their phones. But it's just zeros. It's completely, currency might not even be a physical thing anymore, where like we're going post-currency, whether you think it actually has value or not. So yeah, currency might not have value, but money still has value. Okay, so into the reading. Transition to paper currency. Around 700 BC, the Chinese moved from coins to paper money. By the time Marco Polo, the Venetian merchant, explorer, and writer who traveled through Asia along the Silk Road between AD 1271 and 1295, visited China in approximately AD 1271, the Emperor of China had a good handle on both the money supply and various denominations. In fact, in the place where modern American bills say, "In God we trust," the Chinese inscription at that time warned, "Those who are counterfeiting will be decapitated." Stuff was harsh back in the day. And some places currently right now. Parts of Europe were still using metal coins as their sole form of currency all the way up to the 16th century. This was helped by their colonial efforts. The acquisition of new territories via European conquest provided them with new sources of precious metals and enabled them to keep minting at a greater quantity of coins. However, banks eventually started using paper banknotes for depositors and borrowers to carry around in place of metal coins. These notes could be taken to the bank at any time and exchanged for their face value in metal, usually silver or gold coins. This paper money could be used to buy goods and services. In this way, it operated much like currency does today in the modern world. However, it was issued by banks and private institutions, not the government, which is now responsible for issuing currency in most countries. The first paper currency issued by European governments was actually issued by colonial governments in North America. Because shipments between Europe and the North American colonies took so long, the colonists often ran out of cash as operations expanded. Instead of going back to a barter system, the colonial governments issued IOUs that traded as currency. The first instance was in Canada, then a French colony. In 1685, soldiers were issued playing cards denominated and signed by the governor to use as cash instead of coins from France. Okay, with IOUs, that's IOU, like IOWEYOU. That's also what some people say sometimes, but then it's actually just the letter O, the U. And then I thought that was like actually something else, could actually be like issue of usury or. So anyway, I checked here on the thesaurus and freedictionary.com. There's like IOU, investor-owned utilities, input-output unit. No, it's none of those. There's one here, IO unto. That might have been it. Is owed unto. I think that's probably what it was shortened from, because back in the older times, I'm writing this because this is owed unto so and so, or because this person gave me. So I think that is probably more what it is. I owe unto, or I is owed unto. I think that was probably the abbreviation of IOU. I can check more, but I'm pretty confident that is it. Pretty confident. Okay, so back into the reading. Still got another article to go. Thank you for listening. I hope you are enjoying this. This is somewhat educative to me. And said, if you've watched the Mike Maloney one, there's also stuff in there, but this stuff bears repeating because I think you will overestimate. I've been overestimating how much people know this information. And the more I actually read it and listen, the better I am at communicating it with people when I get into conversations with them. And hopefully this does the same for you. The emergence of currency wars. The shift to paper money in Europe increased the amount of international trade that could occur. Banks and the ruling classes started buying currencies from other nations and created the first currency market. The stability of a particular monarchy or government affected the value of the country's currency, and thus the ability for that country to trade on an increasingly international market. The competition between countries often led to currency wars, where competing countries would try to change the value of the competitor's currency by driving it up and making the enemy's goods too expensive, by driving it down and reducing the enemy's buying power, the ability to pay for war, for example, or by eliminating the currency completely. Now, there was something that I thought of, I was going to mention before, when they're talking about the different people that used to start with the money. This whole idea of the fiat currency, which I'm sure they'll come to here below or in the next article, but this whole idea that it's the government, your state, that actually has the money, and people are like, no, it has to be the state to do it. But you do understand that other countries have their own governments that issue currency. So the whole concept that it's only your state that can issue currency is not something that people even believe is actually true, because we live in a world where multiple states issue different sorts of currency. you might just be like, yes, the state has a monopoly of violence over this given area, so they can actually do it, monopoly of force, so they can do it over that given area, and they're the ones issuing it there. But this whole idea that we can't have private people issuing currency and other kind of things, no, that's you can buy a monopoly, and when you're playing the monopoly game, you have actual currency within that monopoly game that can actually purchase and be used as money within that monopoly game. So we understand this is something that occurs. You play video games, within the video games, there's forms of currency that are just not tied into like outside currency or outside money, but just the actual economy within the game. So we understand that this is something that can be done in different situations and in different ways by other parties besides the central banks or the federal reserves of any given state. Okay, mobile payments. The 21st century has given rise to two novel forms of currency, mobile payments and virtual currency. Mobile payments are money rendered for a product or service through a portable electronic device such as a cell phone, smartphone, or a tablet device. Mobile payment technology can also be used to send money to friends or family members. Increasingly, services like Apple Pay and Google Pay are vying for retailers to accept their platforms for point-of-sale payments. Now, with this one, here in Kenya, M-Pesa by Safaricom is one of the biggest, most successful, and longest-running forms of mobile payments or cell phone money. More people have M-Pesa accounts, and now with Airtel has Airtel Money. And if you're opening a phone service in Kenya, in most of the African market now, sub-Saharan African market, probably even North African, you have to have some form of actual mobile payment system to be competitive. And more people have those than they do with bank accounts. And now the banks have come in and they're starting to say, okay, now through partnerships with the mobile service providers, we're actually going to now sign people up in banks and give them loans and things like this, because that has just been a lot more convenient. And one of the differences here is people in the West, in developed countries, they built societies and became used to using paper, cash, and credit. No, paper, check, yeah, paper is cash, yeah, okay. Check, cash, check, credit, and card. They were used to using that in plastic, so things like that. So I think it was harder for them to get over that and get used to using things like Apple Pay and things like that. But here with M-Pesa, people were not that tied into actually using actual monies. I remember there was a time when my grandparents were still alive, when we used to go back to visit them in the countryside, they would actually prefer we go there and take them a few live chickens, and be like, here, grandma, like we're back, like we're visiting, like here are the chickens, than to take them the same equivalent of those chickens in shillings, because they lived most of their life with that whole barter type of thing, seeing the things in that way. So when it comes to a point where it's like, okay, now we're sending you this nebulous thing on this phone to this location, and now you can go to the store and then you can trade those numbers on the phone. That I think that whole block of thinking it has to be money in this kind of way was something that was easier to surmount or didn't exist at all in certain places. So mobile money was able to catch on a lot faster. Okay, enough rambling. Last section, and we're going to get to the next reading. Virtual currency. Bitcoin, released in 2019 by the pseudonymous, that's a weird word, pseudonymous Satoshi Nakamoto, quickly became the standard of virtual currencies. Virtual currencies have no physical coinage. The appeal of virtual currency is it offers the promise of lower transaction fees than traditional online payment mechanisms, and virtual currencies are operated by a decentralized authority, unlike government-issued currencies. And the bottom line, despite many advances, money still has a very real, permanent way on how we do business today. I agree with that. But yeah, the future is, I think, in virtual currencies, in things like cryptocurrencies and things like that, which I can get a lot more well-versed on. I'm just passingly aware of some of it, haven't gotten into it. Should get to Bitcoin wallet and get into those things. But yeah, if you guys know more about it, let me know where's a good source that you think for a good primer on learning some basic information about cryptocurrencies. Because now I'm seeing like governments trying to get into it now. They're like, oh, we're going to issue our own cryptocurrency. You have places like Facebook be like, oh, you can't pay with the cryptocurrency, but then we'll create our own cryptocurrency. But I think, to me, that is more positive. The more forms there are in there, and with the technology that we have, it's going to be easier to actually exchange the valuations of those these things and compare and contrast, where you don't necessarily need this cabal of people that are doing these things in these rooms, smoke-filled rooms, where they're talking about all these things, moving all these numbers around, where you have more access to the actual information and give more options to the actual people able to do things. I think that's a positive thing. Okay, so getting into 8 things you may not know about money, and this is by, as I said, history.com, and this is by Barbara Maranzani. Okay, so number 1, there's going to be some repetition here, but I think they might go into some other things. I skimmed this before, so I think this will be interesting. So number 1, China created the world's first paper money. Nearly 700 years ago, before Sweden issued the first European banknotes in 1661, China released the first generally circulated currency. In fact, usage of paper notes dates back even earlier, to the 7th century Tang dynasty. For centuries, copper coins had been China's primary currency. In order to carry large amounts of cash, people hefted around ever-increasing number of these coins, not the easiest or safest thing to do over long distances. In an attempt to lighten the load, merchants began to deposit these coins with each other and were issued paper certificates for the coin's value. The paper was certainly lighter, so light in fact that it is believed to have earned the nickname flying money, for its tendency to blow away in a stiff wind. The use of paper money remained in place for the next 200 years until a copper shortage and inflation from overproduction of the bills forced merchants at the Song Dynasty government officials alike to issue and accept paper notes backed by gold reserves, the first legal tender in the world. And then we have it again. You see just the practicalities. It gets to a certain point where there's that tipping point where people are like, oh, okay, now it makes sense. Somebody comes up in the right position and like, okay, now it's worth investing or worth switching to this other thing because that thing that we've been doing has been working enough, but not quite as well as this next thing can happen. And right now we're going through a pandemic as I'm recording this, and there's going to be many things that were paused enough for people to just jump to that tipping point that wasn't quite there to actually think we can invest and try this new thing, because that older thing that was kind of sort of not really working, but we still think it could have gone on for maybe a few more decades until it gets to that point where we just feel we have to switch to something else. Since that's not going on anymore, it's been put on pause, we might as well adopt this new thing as we restart, as we relaunch and things like that. And I'm super excited for the different things that are going to come out of that. Okay, so number 2. The Inca built a great empire without the use of money at all. Unlike the neighboring Aztecs or Mayas, who used goods such as beans and textiles to buy and sell products, there was no concept of money among the Inca. So how did they manage to create the largest and wealthiest empire in South America? Through a highly regimented system known as the mita. From the age of 15, Incan males were required to provide physical labor to the state for a set number of days, sometimes as much as 2/3 of a year. They built public buildings and palaces, as well as an extensive system of roads, 1,400 miles in all, which linked the empire together and allowed for its ongoing expansion. In return, the government provided all the basic necessities of life: food, clothing, tools, housing, etc. No money changed hands. Indeed, even if there had been money, there was simply nowhere for the Incan to spend it. No shops, no markets, no malls. That's not to say that Incan society didn't value the massive piles of gold and silver sitting beneath their lands. In fact, the Inca used these precious metals as parts of their religious worship, considering gold the sweat of the sun and silver the tears of the moon. Okay, those things are not accurate. There were neither of those things. They're actually just precious metals. Metals that are considered precious for their different uses. Because the thing is, gold and silver themselves are also very useful in and of themselves, not just as jewelry and things like this. Now, when you go to this, in this article, they're clearly using money and currency interchangeably. Because there is some sort of trade. Like, your actual use of your physical self going and doing something is a barter trade of sorts. That could be some currency of sorts. Now, I guarantee, yes, there was no actual currency, but is that not money in some sense? Is there not some value in saying you can do XYZ for us, and then when you do XYZ, you get this thing back? Because you're not just going to get the housing and the tools and the clothing without actually putting in that work. And also with these people, some of these religious worship things, what did it also involve? It was like, hey, you can either work with us and build these things, or you're just gonna be out in the woods, and then when the next people over there come over and they just like collect all of you and they go and they worship you with their tears of the moon and sweat of the sun, and then burn you and chop your head off. That is a very big incentive to do all these things, and it's also a very homogeneous, very homogenous kind of society and things like that. There were different tribes and things like that, but I think with the Incans, maybe I don't know what they had with the whole intermarrying and changing the things. I'm sure they had little tribes within the actual place. It wasn't just like, oh, all these people in these areas are Incans. I think they had the different rules and systems, just like you see in Africa right now. Oh, you look at the country of like Kenya, like, oh, that's just black people, that's just Negroes. It's like, no, it's actually 42 different tribes that are rather unique. And I think that might have been the same things even within the Incan Empire. But yeah, so there's some interesting things in here. And you can see there are ways to do things without outright currency, without saying, I'm going to do this for you. If you have a certain community, have a certain culture, have a certain place with certain rules, so the people who are like, oh, we need to stop money, we need to stop currency, it's the root of all evil. Like, provide other options and people might actually adopt them. It's not like it's impossible to do. But do you think what the Incans accomplished is more impressive than what other people at that time were doing? Would you take the no money or currency if it came with the whole beheadings and that other stuff that is in there? I don't know. I wouldn't. I'm glad with the money and the currency that we have now. Okay, so number 3. Medieval merchants developed an early version of the credit card. In an era where currency was often unavailable and few people were literate, the tally stick, a forerunner of today's high-tech credit cards, became increasingly popular in Europe. In this early version of financial record-keeping, notches were made on a wooden stick to indicate the amount lent and owed. These sticks were then split down the middle. The creditor kept one half and the debtor the other. When a payment was made, the sticks were paired up and the payment was marked on the stick. The tally stick system also had another built-in benefit. It was nearly impossible to counterfeit, as the shape, size, and grain of the wooden halves had to match up perfectly. Tally sticks were used in much of Europe, but probably nowhere as extensively as England. For more than 700 years, tally sticks were used to collect taxes from local citizens, until the system was finally abandoned in 1826. 8 years later, when the British Parliament finally decided to get rid of the thousands of leftover tally sticks being kept in storage, they decided to burn them in an underground furnace that heated the House of Lords, resulting in a massive fire that destroyed most of the complex, the worst fire to hit London since the Great Fire of 1666. Wow, yeah, that's this stuff is. I mean, this is not that long ago. We're talking about 1826. It's crazy. 1826, massive fires. Just some of the things that it's odd how many things we take for granted. There was great fires burning down massive parts of cities. Just fire. Those people were burning stuff in the basement. What were they doing? Why would you do it that way? Anyway, these are her sensible, good old days adults. No. Okay, number 4. Tsarist Russia created a tax payable only in animal fur. Of course they would. The arrival of Russian hunters and trappers in what was then a remote wilderness in Siberia in the 1600s kicked off a fur rush. That many historians have compared to the later California gold rush in its intensity. At the height of Russian fur trade, these pelts had become so valuable that they were called soft gold and accepted as hard currency throughout the empire. By some estimates, they accounted for more than 10% of Russia's total revenue. Eager to reap the financial benefits of the trade, Russia's Tsarist government began to regulate the price of pelts. By the early 17th century, in an attempt to keep up with the massive worldwide demand, they went on one step further, imposing a new tax on thousands of Siberian peasants. The yasak was an annual tribute payable solely in fur, required of every male over the age of 18. So yeah, there you have it. That sounds like an odd tax. You think you have issues with taxes that you're being put on today. How about this yasak? What if you had to pay that? And this is the purpose of currency. This is the purpose of having money in a sense. The currency in that sense is now I don't have to be like, okay, I'm living in Africa, it's hot and arid, I have no use to actually have furs. But in Russia, it was cold. Like, we were like, yeah, there's a lot of use for furs in that type, so there was a demand there. But I might want to trade something with somebody in Siberia. So instead of waiting for me to find some use of fur and be like, oh, find somebody else who has something else that I want, that they want fur for some reason. Like, oh, someone in Kenya is maybe traveling to Siberia for some reason, and then I want something for this person in Siberia, so I'll buy that thing from that person in Siberia. He'll send me the fur, I'll send him something that I have, and then I'll get the thing from this person in Kenya who has the thing that I have because they're going to go to... So there's that kind of This is the kind of thing that is made a lot easier by having currency, that you can make these kind of exchanges, and then somebody can be like, I have a business that just does this, and so there's positives with it. But anyway, so next one, number 5. Paul Revere played a key role in the creation of early American currency. So here they're using currency different than before they were saying the money thing, which I'm like, okay, I don't know, money when that Incan situation. But anyway, Revere, famed for his 1775 midnight ride to warn American colonists of an impending British invasion, was actually far more famous in his day for his work as an engraver and as one of the colony's premier silversmiths. Just months after his exploits near Concord, it was Revere who was tasked with designing the engraving plates for the first continental currency, or continentals, produced by Massachusetts to fund the war. I think I'm getting better at that word. Massachusetts. Okay. By the end of the American Revolution, these early paper notes had become worthless, and one of the first projects undertaken by the U.S. government following the ratification of the Constitution was the passage of the Coinage Act, establishing the U.S. Mint and regulating coin production. The first regularly circulating coins in American history were delivered in March 1793, consisting of exactly 11,178 1-cent pieces, or $111.78, and made of rolled copper provided in part by Paul Revere. And I don't know if there's any of these. Like, that's one thing that's another industry. You see this thing when you go to the barter and the different things, the value of things. I don't understand the coin collecting field. There's a lot of collecting fields of hobbyists and things like that where people just value things to an amazing amount. Like if you could find one of these 1-cent pieces in just a decent state, you could probably get 100, 1,000. You might even be able to get 1,000,000 for it. Let me actually check. So I did a bit of searching and I couldn't find the actual 1793 cent, but I found some other thing, a list here of top 5 most valuable United States coins. And now there's one of those birds outside the window, and it might be making its cawing sound in the background. Excuse that. But hey, let's get to finishing this article up. So here from this most valuable U.S. coins. 1913 Liberty Head nickel. Most recently, the 1913 Liberty Head nickel sold at auction for a whopping $3.1 million US dollar. However, this coin can be valued around $4.4 million. There's a 1870 dollar, which has been at $2.5 million. There's a 1927 double eagle. And then not everyone has an extra 1.2 million US dollars laying around. Somebody paid for that. A 1794 silver dollar. So that's as close to this one. So it says the $825,098. That's almost $1 million. And so the 1994 silver dollar, that's if you're able to find one. Less than 2,000 were produced. So this one, there was already a lot more than the 2,000 produced of these. And then with those, they might have all been melted down or accounted for. So maybe that's why you haven't actually seen a valuation of that specific one. But I'm sure if you could actually find one and they actually existed and you could find them, it probably would be around that because it's literally the first mint. But maybe, as I said, they've already been accounted for and people know they were destroyed or the quality wasn't good enough for it to last that long. So I don't know. And then the last one is the 1838 half dollar. Due to yellow fever outbreak in New Orleans during the time of the mintage, along with complications with the coin press, the U.S. Mint produced only 12 of the 1838 half dollar, and purchasing of these rare beauties will sell the buyer back upwards of 745,000 US dollars. So with that, when you see like with people, they value this currency not even as currency, where it has gone back to some other kind of valuation, where you are spending the more typical currency that the average person currently in current year values, $750,000 for that, for a half dollar that was printed in 1838, because you have some valuation for that. I cannot imagine a time in my life where I would consider turning over common currency, common used currency, $745,000 value of commonly used currency for that coin. But there's people out there who do it for their own subjective reasons, which are just beyond me. Okay, let's try to wind this down. We got 3 more parts. Number 6, the first gold rush in American history took place in North Carolina, not California. In 1799, the 12-year-old son of a Cabarrus County farmer named John Reed discovered a gold nugget weighing an estimated 17 pounds, so large that his family used it as a doorstop. When more gold was discovered in neighboring counties, it. I'm just taking some pause here. The guy found 17 pounds of gold, and they were using it as a doorstop. This true. It's not that long ago. 1799 is not that long ago. Oh, man. Okay, when more gold was discovered in neighboring counties, it kicked off the first prospecting boom in American history, drawing thousands of people to the area, many of them newly arrived immigrants. By the early 19th century, more than 30,000 North Carolinians were mining for gold, making it the second largest profession in the state after agriculture. The prospect of financial reward was so high that professional mining companies soon entered the scene, bringing with them workers and engineers with years of experience, extracting precious metals from South American mines. For more than 30 years, all gold used in the U.S. coins was minted in North Carolina, and a U.S. mint was opened in the city of Charlotte in 1837. However, decades of mining eventually depleted the region's reserves, and by the 1860s, the Carolina gold boom had ended. So this one, that's the thing that happens. It's a limited thing. You find better ways of mining. You might be able to go deeper. Like the amount of the surface of the Earth that we've actually gone to. If you actually look and you see like the deepest hole, like the Mariana Trench, which is the deepest place that we know of. If the Earth was the size of a cube of a pool ball, you know the ball that you play snooker or billiards with, it would be smoother than that. So we haven't even cracked the surface. For all we know, the center of the Earth could have some multi-mile thick ring of just straight gold, straight gold, straight diamonds. We don't know these things, but one thing that's probably more likely, interestingly enough, is probably going to be going and pulling in asteroids or mining the moon or finding other elements out there, because these things that I mentioned are still valuable regardless of this person using it as a doorstep. This technology that uses gold in and of itself, cell phones, pretty much all the tech you use has some form of gold in it. It's like a good conductor and things like that. And there's many other things you can do with these things. So finding more of these things is positive. The valuation of it will change. It could get to a point if we have an asteroid the size of the moon of gold. It'll get to the point where now if you find gold on Earth, you might be like, I'll just go back to using it as a doorstep, because it's not something that's limited, because it's just easier to just get it from this moon thing, this asteroid out in orbit. So there's going to be changes like that are going to happen with things that are super exciting. Like another thing was like the oil. Back in the time when farming was the main thing you were doing, if you found oil in your land, you'd be like, oh, we can't farm here. This is garbage. We can't do this. We got to move. Like, oh, we're lost. We're destitute. Now you find oil. You're like, woohoo! I know there's also places on Earth when you have this technology. There might be places in Africa and other places that are not as depleted as somewhere like Carolina, where they had that ability to go and check and see. So these interesting things about this globalized world and this team human that we're getting into. Okay, so number 7, counterfeiting, counterfeiting was rampant during the American Civil War. Money tampering has been around nearly as long as money itself has existed. Early coins were shaved around the edges, with the perpetrator pocketing the excess precious metals. Rome, among other ancient civilizations, made counterfeiting, it's a weird word, counterfeiting a crime punishable by death. The US government struggled with the issue from its inception, going as far as to hire ex-counterfeiter to design some of its first coins. Despite these efforts, the problem continued, likely reaching its apex during the American Civil War, with dozens of different notes and coins being issued by state, local, and federal governments on both sides. It was nearly impossible to detect the real from the fake. It's been estimated that at least 1/3 and possibly half of all money then in circulation was fraudulent. In fact, the U.S. Secret Service was created in 1865 not to protect the president, but to combat counterfeiting. The term greenback, now common term for money, also traces its origins to the war. The phrase was derived from the intricate green ink designs used on the reverse side of Civil War-era banknotes, which the U.S. Treasury Department hoped would prevent counterfeiting. So there's some two interesting things here. I've been reading the Lee Child series of the Jack Reacher books, and his brother works for the Secret Service, and he was involved in like some stuff with the counterfeiting. And I found out, I was like, oh, this is the string that has come up a couple of times. And started. It's like, why is the Secret Service into this? But yeah, I was going to look into it, and here we find out that yeah, it was actually created to do this. And the greenbacks thing, I think people are like, oh, it's a dollar. Yes, the dollar is green, and the U.S. They changed. They started adding some colors into the notes even while I was living in the U.S. And it's different from like when I first got to the U.S. to now. but Kenya has just switched to some very colorful notes, and most countries actually have very colorful money. It's not common to have it green. So I remember thinking when I started realizing some of the issues in society, it was like it's not so much races, it's not so much the sexes. It's if there's one color that counts, it's the green. Like that was the amount of money. But that's something that was just in our mind. We kind of just think, just like how people just think Secret Service. I think they just in general think protecting the president of the United States of America. But no, it's actually its main purpose was that. So the whole like green thing, why did they pick green? Like leaves, money, does money grow on trees? Would the whole like, oh, people think money grows on trees thing, would that be something said as commonly if for some reason green, like red dye was the most common thing and then money had initially been red? I guess the trees, money leaves actually do fall off of trees when they actually are red. So let's say there was some other weird color that trees are not. But then I've seen plants with like all sorts of. But okay, most trees have green leaves and things like this. So I'm just wondering. Let's say it was like yellow again, autumn. So anyway, it was a color blue. There was blue. Would people say that as much, or is it because we relate money with green? Okay, so last part. Number 8. West Point Mint was the Fort Knox of silver and a whole lot of gold. When most people think of vast amounts of precious metals tucked away in secure locations, it's Fort Knox that comes to mind. Few people know that a tiny facility in New York State once rivaled Knox in the wealth department and was home to the largest concentration of silver in the United States. Opened in 1937 and originally known as the West Point Bullion Depository, the mint is located just miles away from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. There are currently more than 54 million ounces of gold in deep storage at the facility, with an estimated value of more than $80 billion, making West Point the second largest gold depository after Fort Knox. Though it did not achieve official status as a U.S. mint until 1988, it began striking pennies and gold medallions decades earlier. Today, it issues coins struck with the W mint mark in gold, silver, and platinum, including the only U.S. coins issued to commemorate the September 11th attacks. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this. Just a few thoughts. I thought there were some things that I learned here. Turning on this September 11th attacks, we're talking about here like, okay, so this is the place is Fort Knox and this West Point Bullion Depository. The most gold, they say here, okay, the most silver, but in the United States of America, as I mentioned before, with the whole ability to mine and locate things, for all we know, there's some places underground somewhere where there's billions, trillions of gold just sitting there just as a lump of gold for whatever kind of geological reason. I think they found out that there's probably no actually ways those things can occur. But for all I know, that could be there, where technically there could be more places where there actually is a lot more gold than the United States of America. But when we talk about certain things, it's known amount of gold because we have the awareness of this. We can actually account for it. But if something is an unknown, we can't really account for that. So you can only deal with what you know and what you normally test for, what you can actually research for, what you can actually like measure and things like this. Because some of the things you just don't know. Just like in New York, they've been actually testing a lot of people. They know those numbers are a lot higher than they are here in Kenya. There's more people in Kenya than there are in New York City, yet there's more people in New York City infected by this disease, by this virus. I don't know. Maybe they've just actually been testing it better. Just like they know, they've looked and seen, do we have gold in Manhattan Island? No, we've checked. We've had people digging around here for some time, so we know there's no gold. For all I know, there's places in smaller than Manhattan Island in Kenya that have never actually been mined that they might be able to find things in. And then you tie this September 11th attack. They're mentioning this thing. There's this thing I just saw with the people trying to like cancel the actual memorial, putting the lights up in the sky, and I don't understand why they're doing some of these things. I don't understand. I don't understand why some people do some things and say they're doing it because of these things. Now, I hope with this reading and listening, and thank you again for listening, that you've learned something. I've learned some stuff. I found this valuable. I hope you find it valuable. If you do find it valuable, you can use some of your currency and go to the merchandise store, which is going to be links below or wherever you listen to this, where I have some stuff. I'm in some talks with some friend about starting some businesses. I was talking about being pro in businesses. We're going to get some business going up. We're going to be selling this stuff not on the Redbubble store that is now. I shall leave everything that I've posted on the Redbubble store there because I've sold some stuff on there. They've provided a good product, but then I'll figure out a system where once my private thing is up, At least for a year, I'll leave the red bubble up. Then I'll consider switching over. But at least the newer stuff will be on the new portals so I can get more control and things like that and be more interesting. And I'll be tying stuff in with the content that I'm making and doing different things and getting more ideas in there, getting more communication out there. And I value your time. Like, share, subscribe. Let me know about your other things. If you've learned things about money, if you think money is still the root of all evil, love of money is still the root of all evil, have at it, and you can make a case for it, and I'll maybe debate you in the comment section. Till next time, goodbye.